Great.
We're almost live. We're preparing, or it is preparing. Okay, we should be broadcasting.
Okay. All right, so it is 4:04. I'm going to call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. For anybody who's watching on YouTube, we will be having an opportunity for citizens to speak during citizens to be heard, but there is a 30-second delay from YouTube to Zoom. So if you are on YouTube right now and you want to join to make a comment during citizens to be heard, the Zoom information is available at the top of the agenda for today. And if you do happen to join and we've moved on, we can just carry that back. So we'll wait for that to be casted to folks. I'm going to skip over for a moment and just quickly move on to ex parte communications and disclosures while we're waiting to see if anybody has joined. Does anyone here have any ex parte communications about anything on the agenda that they wish to disclose?
I have talked to Will Hansen. He was just asking how to participate in the Zoom meeting. And so that's all.
Awesome. Is Will going to try and join us today, maybe make a comment?
I think so.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. All right. So again, just before we move on, there is a short delay. If you are on the YouTube link and you would like to speak during citizens to be heard or during our agenda item, the Zoom information is available at the top of the agenda, which is on the county website. You can sign in, we'll let you into the meeting and you'll be able to speak. So there is a 30-second delay from YouTube to Zoom, just so you're aware. Okay, I assume we don't have anyone in our meeting room or waiting room.
I just let in, or there is someone, and then Jaylyn needs another copy of the link, so I'm going to send that to her right now.
Okay. All right, so I assume Nelson is Rachel. And then we have Liz.
Rachel. Yes, I'm not sure about Liz.
Hi, Liz, are you here to make a comment during citizens to be heard? Liz, if, yeah, oh, good, you're off mute.
Can you hear me? Needs another copy of the link, so I'm going to send that to her.
Liz, you'll want to mute your computer or close the YouTube link while you're speaking on Zoom. Close the YouTube link or mute the audio there. Yep, okay. And you can come off of mute and make your comment, Liz. Could you state your full name?
I'm sorry that I had the YouTube on because I wasn't sure where you were at in the meeting. I'm so sorry.
You're fine, no worries. Liz, would you mind stating your full name and then making your comment?
My name is Liz Thomas, and I was going to comment on the B&B agenda item. Are you there?
That is a conversation we're having later, but you're welcome to make your comment now because that's not a public meeting or public hearing. It's part of the commission's discussion.
Oh, I see. Well, I would rather make it after I heard the discussion because I wasn't sure where the discussion's going. Is that not possible?
Gotcha. So that discussion item is just about the commission having a conversation about whether this is something we want to get on our agenda for a more formal topic, which would allow for additional citizen comment. So we won't be going into any depth and we won't be debating or discussing any specific issues or any specific applications that have been put in front of the county. If you would like to make a general comment, you're welcome to. And otherwise, you know, you can wait around for the discussion. And then if we do decide to put it on a future agenda, it'll be listed as a discussion item and you're welcome to come and participate in that conversation as well.
Okay, well, I'll just make a general comment then, and then I will get out of your Zoom meeting and just watch on the YouTube. So my general comment is I was a little confused because I thought that that we had already closed this discussion on B&Bs and residential areas. And so I don't want to say anything that's just out of line, but there's many B&Bs within one block of my neighborhood, many more within 4 blocks. And, it used to just be one, and we all liked the one, and it was quiet and nice. And, the cumulative impacts of numerous B&Bs in residential neighborhoods, I don't think should be minimized. It is very disruptive. They're loud, there's strangers coming, every weekend, they're lost. They're knocking on the wrong doors, but basically it just changes the character of our neighborhood into kind of a nightly rental tourist neighborhood. And I'm sad that it's happened in my neighborhood, but I really hope it doesn't happen in other neighborhoods. It's sort of it's just sad. And I guess that's my general comment. And I will participate in the future. Thanks for letting me ramble.
Thank you for your comments, Liz. We really appreciate you joining us this evening. Okay. And looking at the list of participants, I believe everybody else is a member of the commission or staff or Jalen. So we'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes from May 11th. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes? And are there any comments? I'll start with one that I assume will just be corrected, which was the need to insert link to recording on page 1. Are we planning to have a link to archives of the recordings in the meetings? And is it just going to be on the county website? I'm wondering if that was meant to point to something else. That's it.
I am not sure. Abby put the minutes together. We do have the recordings up. They are also on YouTube. So I'm not sure if that's something we want to include in our minutes, or if we just want to leave them on the public websites.
I think I just need to include the link to the public website for the minutes. The county council meetings did include the link to the official audio that was on the website. And I think when I submitted those minutes, that official audio link was not yet up on the county website, but it very well could be now. So yeah, I can make sure that gets added in. Thanks.
I assumed it was there intentionally. Yeah. Great. Does anyone else have any comments or concerns about the minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, so Brian has made a motion to approve the May 11th minutes, seconded by Bob. Any further discussion? All right, so Bob, and you're the only person I can't see. So what we'll do is we'll do the same vocal show of hands, and Bob, I'll just need you to give me a vocal aye or nay. So all in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That is unanimous. Wonderful.
Emily, we do have a guest in the waiting room. Do you want me to admit them now?
Yeah, why not? Okay. I see the name listed as Thea. Thea, are you here to make a comment during Citizens to be Heard, or to comment on one of the items on our agenda? Thea, are you there? Okay. If you've just joined as a guest to our Zoom meeting and you're speaking, we can't hear you. You have no mic or camera, just here to listen. Okay, wonderful. So you're welcome to stay and listen in on mute. This meeting is also available on YouTube, where it's streaming live from, if you search for Grand County IT, you can find it there. So that's another place where you can view. Wonderful. So I was wondering on the agenda, Mila, I didn't recognize this until now. Is there a reason we put the action item after the discussion item? I guess normally we save the discussions for, okay.
We could absolutely switch those two back. I think that was just a holdover from the other action items being public hearings in the past agenda.
Gotcha.
And Will Hansen is also here in the waiting room now. So if you'd like, I can invite him in.
That's perfect. Thank you. Hi, Will.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. Why don't we do this since Will has just joined? Why don't we move the discussion item until after the conversation about Viewgate Terrace? Okay. So Will, we'll start with.
Emily, I've just got a question. If there is a action item and someone comes in late and wants to speak to that, will they be able to, or how do you want to work that?
Yeah, I mean, normally if we have a lot of items on the agenda, we reserve the public hearings or public action items until 5 p.m. But since we have a short agenda and we normally leave our discussion items until later, and the applicant is here, I think we should keep this schedule. We'll have the staff report, we'll have the applicant's opportunity to speak. And then, you know, if anybody is here to make a comment, they'll be able to. I don't anticipate that discussion going very long, since it's a conversation about putting it on a future agenda. So I don't think we run the risk of removing people from the public conversation, especially since it's not a public hearing. But
I'm okay with that. Okay.
Recognize. Cool. So Will, thanks for joining us. We'll ask staff to give us a report on this application and then give you an opportunity to speak after we've addressed our questions to staff. If anyone is listening on YouTube and would like to comment on the action item for the Viewgate Terrace preliminary plat phase 1, you're welcome to join, and Mila will let you into the call and keep you on mute, and then we'll have an opportunity for citizen comment as well following the applicant's statement. So staff, would you give your report, please? Thank you.
Sure. So this is a project that you should be familiar with. You will have seen it before. It's the Viewgate Terrace HDHO and also hotel project. The applicant has asked to phase the project instead of just having the whole thing go to final plat at the same time. If you'll recall, this is at 1248 South Highway 191. And the property in its entirety is 19.86 acres. The front of the property is zoned highway commercial, and then the back is rural residential. And there is an already approved high density housing overlay in place for the back part of the property. The hotel and parking lot in the front are already built. So what the applicant has proposed in this preliminary plat as phase 1 is to divide the front 2 lots, or the front part, into 2 lots, and then leave the back portion for the HDHO development as 1 lot at this time. The preliminary plat has gone through the DRT, and the applicant has worked with county attorney and engineering and agencies to make sure that everything is in place to accommodate the future development as well. So that has been planned for. You might note that there are currently a house and garage in the right-of-way for the new road, and these will be removed prior to the dedication of the road to the county. And then in addition, the developer is responsible for replacing and repairing the road after development during phase 2, and they've agreed to this. And we're working with the county attorney to make sure that that is written up. And then there was one other comment from the roads department, that was that the right-of-way on the cul-de-sac will need to accommodate a spillway. And that is something that we can easily fix prior to final plat. So we are, the only condition that staff has for this preliminary plat is that we would like the applicant to add a note that the entirety of lot 3 is the HDHO development subject to the recorded master plan and development agreement. And other than that, we don't have any issues with this. It is, you know, like we said, just phase 1 of a currently approved HDHO development.
Mila, could you just clarify, since we already have the approved HDHO development attached, what is is it just a technicality to add that note? Or, I mean, I assume that that would not be a controversial issue, but I'm just curious to know like why that's even necessary.
It's just extra assurance for us so that this plat because this will be a final plat that will be recorded. And so it's just making certain that there is no way that HDHO could be you know, that it could be changed. So technically it wouldn't be necessary because that master plan is recorded, but we thought that it would be a really good idea to put that on the plat as well.
Thanks. Garish?
Could you show us the delineation of the proposed 3 lots? Now, I'm having a hard time figuring out where the 3rd one would be.
So let me, hopefully my computer will cooperate here and I can share my screen. So in general, the whole large space in the back is the, let's see, is the 3rd lot.
The plot is labeled lot 2. So there, on the drawings, there is no lot 3. It's like 1A, 1B, and 2.
Yes, that's right. And those front 2, here we go. Those front 2 lots are 1A and 1B because they accommodate the hotel and the parking lot, and they are split by the road. And so those are 1A and 1B because the road will be county and not part of a private lot. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm seeing it.
No.
There we go. Okay.
So if you can see this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this dark line here is what delineates lot 1A. And then this line here is 1B. And those curve down along the road.
Okay. So the road divides 1A and 1B.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that road will be dedicated to the county.
Okay, so what's really going on here is just building the road, and then that's what necessitates the subdivision of the 2 lots.
Yes, that's why those are 2 lots. That's right.
Now
I'm just curious why having the roads, is there a reason? I'm just trying to understand, having the road be going through a lot automatically would make that lot subdivided into 2 lots? Or is there a general rule on the effect of a road going through a lot like this?
I think it just is a lot easier for the county, instead of having to obtain an easement or anything like that, to be able to just have the lots end at the road. So we don't need to worry about it. It's not on private property. There's no need for, you know, any kind of negotiation or anything with the property owner. It's just easier if the lots are separate from the county land.
Yeah, there are plenty of county roads that go through other parcels, and I'm not sure that the county's felt a need to have those parcels separated into different lots. So I'm just curious if this is kind of normal practice or this is an unusual situation.
I don't know that I can necessarily answer that question about normal versus unusual, but this is the way that they decided to go, and the county is very happy to have it be this way, because I think it's easier for everyone involved.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a point of order. I think there's occasional microphone scratching, and I think it's OB. who's on the phone, so he might consider muting himself until he next wants to speak. There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions for staff before we invite the applicant to make a statement? All right, Mr. Hanson, if you want to come off of mute and address the commission, you're welcome to do so. Would you mind starting by just stating your full name just so we have it on the recording, please?
Sure. William Hanson. And can you hear me? I just want to confirm that. Okay, super. You know, Mila's done a fine job of just explaining this. We're keeping this phase pretty simple. We, you know, to Gersh's point, we contemplated just leaving those lots next to each other and then leaving it as is with the private drive and the utility easements. But in the interest of the expansion that the HDHO will bring about, we went ahead and left that so that the right-of-way is the full right-of-way for a county to deed it to the county, and then it'll be all yours. The road itself, the construction of the road, to Kevin's point, will be actually part of phase 2. However, again, in the future interest, we simply wanted to show it as projected, proposed, if you will. And then all the engineering and everything on those lines is part of phase 2. And you should see that probably in the next month. It should come before the commission. We've been working on it's been to the DRT and we're working on that aspect of it. But this is simply to separate out, as Mila pointed out, the hotel, the highway commercial, mainly for financing reasons, to get that separated out so we can go forward with the HDHO portion. And that's really, I guess that's all I have at this point, unless you have questions.
I'd love to ask the commission to ask you any questions. Before we do that, I just want to state one more time for anybody watching on YouTube that if you'd like to join and address the commission and make a comment, the Zoom link is at the top of the agenda, which is available on the county page. There's about a 30-second delay, and Mila will let you into the meeting and you'll be welcome to make a comment. I know I've said that multiple times, but better safe than sorry, since this is still new territory. So thank you, Mr. Hanson. Garish, I see you off mute. Did you have a comment or question for the applicant?
Yeah, just a comment. Did the County Roads Department specify the need for a crosswalk or anything going across the county road from that larger parking lot to the hotel area?
Did you want me to respond to that, or do you want to, Mila?
Either one is fine.
It hasn't been a discussion at this point. They did not bring that up.
Yeah, the applicant has been through a couple rounds of conversation with Bill Jackson at the Roads Department, and with Dave, our engineer, and they have not asked for that at this point.
Okay,
that might be a good idea, because you know the safety of your clients and the people there are very important. So
yeah, no, I think that's a viable question, and I appreciate that, in the sense of I think that will definitely come up, and we would be more than happy to do that because of the ADTs. I think probably, well, I don't know that there would be a code for it, but yeah, I think it's a good practice for sure. Yeah, because of the number that we've speculated on traffic on that, for sure.
Yeah, and I will add that not only do we have a chance to make those sorts of changes before final plat for this phase, but we would also be able to make those changes if we determine they're necessary before final plat for the HDHO portion, when the road will actually be constructed. So you'll see it again. Yeah,
the road has to be expanded. The road itself has to be expanded at approximately 10 feet. It wasn't our best crystal ball moment. We didn't look forward quite like we should have. Otherwise, we would have built it to county road spec. But so it does have to be expanded. And at that point, we would be able to really modify that from that point.
Mila, this is a question for staff. We've had questions about fire code and turnabout standards. And I know that when the county council approved this HDHO, it was at substantially less density than was initially proposed. I'm just curious to hear about the justification for that. Like, is the cul-de-sac here sufficient? Is there any concern from the fire department as far as access?
No, we have had, we've got buy-in from all of the appropriate agencies. The fire department is okay with this turnaround.
Thank you.
And if I may comment to that, Emily, also in the phase 2, we have designed it to where access, there will be 2 loops on each side of essentially that straight line into the cul-de-sac. There will be a loop on the east and a loop on the west for fire access as well.
Okay.
So
thanks. I remember there being some preliminary roads drawn out in the first application. Okay. Thank you. Great. Any other questions for the applicant or to staff before we move to citizen comment? All right. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. I guess because it's not a public hearing, I might be playing this wrong, but I did see that somebody was just let in. And I think it's, I don't know, I'm willing to let this person speak if they would like to speak for up to 3 minutes, if this is related to this item. It looks like Mark, did you join us to make a comment?
No, I did not. I'm for the next item. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so any comments or discussion about this agenda item? Okay, in that case, I'll entertain a motion if somebody would like to raise one.
I'll make the motion. I move to approve the Viewgate Terrace Phase 1 preliminary plat for the parcel located at 1248 South Highway 191, conditioned on the following: that the applicant adds a plat note indicating that lot, the large lot, maybe 2 or 3, whatever it's called, is subject to the governance of Ordinance 599, approving the Viewgate Terrace subdivision and the associated master plan and development agreement.
I'll second.
All right. Motion made by Kevin, seconded by Garish. Any discussion? Kevin, you're welcome to kick us off.
I have nothing further to say.
Garish? All right, any other discussion? Okay, with that, I'll call the vote. All in favor of moving to approve the Viewgate Terrace Phase 1 preliminary plat for the parcel located at 1248 South Highway 191, conditioned on the plat note as defined in the packet, say aye or raise your hand. Bob? All right. Bob, can you hear us? You're on mute.
It's my fault for asking him to mute himself earlier. No, apparently it was irreversible.
Looks like he's off mute. Bob, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
You vote yes. All right, made it in. So that vote is unanimously in favor. So thank you, Mr. Hanson, for joining us.
Thank you. I look forward to bringing the rest of it to you guys so you can see everything. So thanks. Have a great day.
Take care. All right, so now we'll move on to a discussion item, and just for some context here, and then I'll pass it over to Garish. Garish raised this after, well, first during the conversation that we had last week and in the week preceding about drafting a letter to County Council, getting clarification about overnight accommodation overlay eligibility zones, and the question of, is it something we want to look at by underlying zone came up, and this led to Garish raising the question to me of B&Bs. Have we received any volume of complaints or comment or applications for B&Bs in residential areas? Garish, I will note that I know that staff has been very busy. I don't think they've had the chance to pull the data that you had requested, so maybe you could just clarify the data you asked for. And the question on the table is not to discuss the merits of this necessarily, but to determine if this is something we want to get on a future agenda when we can have the data in front of us, and notice context to the public, and discuss if this is something that requires further exploration or something we should prioritize as a commission. So, but Garish, I'd love for you to correct anything I said incorrectly in seeing your comments, and provide a little extra context. I think you just muted yourself. No, we can't hear you. You're still muted.
Mute now.
There you
Okay.
are.
Thank you. So at our last meeting, there was some discussion about does the council, or do we as a commission feel like the public would be best served if there were eligibility areas delineated within the county for overnight accommodations? And subsequent to that, I got contacted by a citizen who said that there are people in a neighborhood that are upset that there's a Airbnb type hotel set up in a residential zone that is advertising 16 occupants. And I got to thinking that maybe we ought to, at least talk about whether this is something that we want to discuss further. Before the code was changed and the overnight accommodations overlay was established for campgrounds, hotels, other types of overnight accommodations, there was a lot of discussion about a different way to handle it, which was because there was a big issue at the time we had, for those of you that are new to the commission, there were a lot of people who had very strong opinions about the effect of Airbnb type setups in their neighborhoods, and the fear that their neighborhoods were going to be irreparably harmed if they were allowed to continue to be constructed and used in that fashion. So we as a commission spent quite a bit of time trying to tease out what are the salient issues and mitigation measures that could be applied. And Kevin did a lot of work kind of mapping out the existing licensed legal Airbnb type operations. So we had an idea of what the density was, where they existed. And then a lot of people came to both meetings and hearings that we held on the subject. Subsequent to that, then we came up with some proposals to restrict that type of of use in residential zones to, for instance, they had to be owner occupied. It had to be a house that somebody actually lived in. And there was discussion about, well, should we require that they serve breakfast? Or how close together can they be? What is the ultimate density that would be allowed? You know, is it one every block, one every quarter mile, one every 200 feet? You know, we went through a litany of various proposals, but they never got, I don't think there was even a hearing at council. Then the legislature, or some members of the legislature, got wind of restrictions that Grand County was contemplating that would limit the commercial use of properties in general and properties in residential areas specifically. And but I think it was more in the city of Moab than the county, but there were people that were complaining that they were going to lose the ability to pay their mortgage, and they weren't going to be able to send their kids to college, and they couldn't buy a new truck, and for whatever reasons, they got the ear of some legislators who were pretty influential, who then said, well, if Moab and Greene County want to maintain the ability to have authority over Airbnbs, they better tone things down. So then we shifted gears and went into the overnight accommodations overlay route. The way I read the code now, none of the mitigating factors that we talked about are part of the code now. So essentially anybody who wants to build an Airbnb hotel type thing, or somebody who has a house with some extra rooms, can apply under the new overnight accommodations for overlay for Airbnb type operation in their house. I don't know how much interest there has been in doing that, especially lately, since we haven't had a lot of tourist economy kind of driving people's decisions. But I did ask Emily if she would ask staff if they could come up with a, if people are commenting either that they are bothered by existing Airbnb operations, or they are inquiring about starting some new ones, kind of what the interest is. Now, I don't know if this is, it's not really related to the eligibilities mapping that we've talked about at our last meeting, because currently anyone can apply for an overnight accommodation overlay of any type in any zone. That's my understanding. So I'm just wondering, is this something that the commission feels is important enough and pressing enough that we would want to look further into it, or if it's a non-issue, nobody's really squawking, it's not something that we want to spend a lot of time on. So it's more of a question for you guys than anything else,
So Garish, if I were to make sure I hear you correctly, it sounds like it's sort of two sides to a similar question around, certainly for redevelopment into an overnight accommodation. If you had a homeowner who wanted to place an application in front of the council to create a B&B on their property, but it was tied to an existing property, we don't have redevelopment standards for overnight accommodation overlays. And we know that that's a gap that we intend to address. But then there's this question that we've just gone through the process of re-upping the standards for new development. And so if there were a new Airbnb type development, that the standards that were in place from the conversations about 2 years ago are no longer reflected in the code. Did I capture that right?
Yeah, I didn't talk about redevelopment, and I don't know what you have in mind for that, but it's like if your next door neighbor, Emily, wanted to have an Airbnb,
yeah,
you know, and you as a neighbor weren't necessarily too keen on the idea, what sorts of constraints or restrictions would you like placed on that commercial use of a residential property?
Yeah, and another reason I use the word redevelopment is maybe this is actually more of a question for staff of, you know, if that is even a viable possibility in some, you know, framing right now under our existing code, because I think there's a little confusion there. But yeah, you're shaking your head. That was my understanding. But that if there was some future place where that would happen, it would be a redevelopment, not a new development. So, but Mila, maybe you could just.
So, yeah, so first of all, I apologize. I actually don't think I saw the data request. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, Garish. So if you can just let me know, through an email is fine, exactly what you want me to find out for you, and I'll do that. But as far as B&Bs go right now, they're all legal non-conforming uses. So there is no way to start a new B&B in Grand County at the moment, the way that we have our code written. You can continue to operate any B&B that's been in business continuously without a lapse of more than 6 months. So as soon as the operations cease for 6 months or longer, then that's considered to be abandonment, and that license is no longer valid, and there's no way to reobtain it. We, as far as redevelopment goes, you know, we do of course know that that is a gap in our OAO standards right now. That would be, you know, changing existing use or expanding, or, you know, anything along those lines, other than, you know, just new development. We have not really, you know, I don't think that I personally have fielded any requests for a B&B since I've been here. I think part of the reason is that it seems to be very well known in the community that that's not something that's allowed right now. We have had many people apply for their overnight rental licenses in the already licensed OAO areas, you know, in the condos and things like that are going in. But otherwise, we have not had any inquiries, as far as I'm aware, regarding new B&Bs.
I just want to ask some clarifying questions, Mila. My understanding is that we actually do have in the code, you know, as of last year, some kind of bed and breakfast overlay zone, right? I just looked in the code.
All the overnight accommodations are under the overnight accommodations overlay. Okay. So all the B&Bs right now are all legal non-conforming uses. So they're all allowed. So they are still governed by the code, but you're not allowed to have a new one.
Okay, but so we don't have some, you know, we've got these various overlay zones, and there isn't one that's called the bed and breakfast overlay zone.
No, there's not.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I was, yeah, I think there's a few different issues that have come up, and to answer Garish's basic question, is this something we want to get into? I think my answer is mostly no. I think we've got a lot of other things on our plate, and I don't think that most of this is urgent, but there might be a few smaller aspects that are. You know, the one question is allowing new B&Bs. A different question is changing this legal non-conforming use for existing B&Bs. It's something that some of the owners might want to happen. Another issue, which I expect might come up later this meeting, is expansion of existing B&Bs, especially those that are started out rather small, and you can argue they don't have issues with their neighbors. And then finally, there's a question that Garish brought up of, you know, if we are, you know, right now there aren't a whole lot of regulations for B&Bs. You know, do we want to revisit that? So I guess my point is those are all distinct issues, and just because we want to go into one of them doesn't mean we want to go into all the others. So I guess I'll leave it there, since Emily said she didn't want to discuss the merits of things, but I think we should be careful and distinct, there's like 4 more, different things we could do to tweak the B&B regulations, and they're kind of distinct things.
Yeah, so, and Garris, I see your hand, but just really quick to clarify, knowing that this is a very contentious issue and possibly even an emotional issue for many people in town, I just want to make sure that if we do go down the road of exploring any sort of possible, options, that we just make it a more formal discussion and have some data available. And this is something that I think if it's a topic we explore, we should do it with the utmost transparency, I guess. Not that we aren't doing it here, but just to make sure that we provide a little bit more context to the discussion in the packet so that people can join and people can understand the boundaries of the conversation. So where I'd love to maybe get us to is, like, one, is this something that there is consensus on the commission to take up? Is it something we think we need to take up individually, or any one of the options you laid out, Kevin, or bullet points? On a personal note, I know that we want to revisit the redevelopment standards. That's a priority of mine, and that might be the right time to look at this issue holistically. With that, I understand it's not all strictly redevelopment, but as we are revisiting our code, it seems like it might be a good time to take that up. Garris, I know you had your hand up, but I just would love to give everybody just a chance to kind of sound, is this something that you see as a priority to taking up sometime in the next 6 months? And is there a framing of what you prioritize for what you would like to see us discuss or explore as a body? So Garris, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I just want to ask, before you get everyone's opinion, Mila, maybe I didn't understand you correctly, but I think my understanding is that, yes, existing Airbnb type operations are non-conforming uses. But I don't see anything in the land use code that prohibits anyone from coming to the county saying, I want to start a new one.
What prohibits that is the overnight accommodations overlay. So there's no, right. So overnight accommodations of any kind are no longer a by right use in any of the zones. So a B&B qualifies as an overnight accommodation. So anyone who would want to start that would have to come through the overnight accommodations overlay process.
Right. I understand that. I thought that at the time that this section of the code was written, that the overnight accommodations overlay was applied to all the existing licensed Airbnbs, but perhaps I'm wrong about that.
It was not applied to the B&Bs.
Okay.
Those remain as legal non-conforming uses.
So you're applied to condominium units and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Overnight rentals, okay. Right. Yep.
Right. So the process would be that if someone were to wanted to develop a new Airbnb, they first would have to apply for the overnight accommodations overlay to apply to their property.
Right.
And then they could take it further development to whatever type of overnight accommodation it would be.
Yes, right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Garris, with that clarification, does that still make this a priority for you that you'd like to see raised? And is there a particular part of this that you think is worth addressing? Again, I'm just going to put on the table the option of picking this up at the time that we review the redevelopment standards related to OAO accommodations. So I guess put that as one option on the table, but I see you, Kevin, but Garris, I'd love to just quick reaction since you're the one who brought this up. And then we'll just quickly poll the commission.
I don't know how big the issue is. And, other than the anecdotal information that I got after our last planning commission meeting about this 116, 16-person little Airbnb unit. I haven't heard any complaints from anybody. So I was wondering if staff could tell us, are they getting complaints? And are they getting inquiries? And if they're not getting complaints and they're not getting inquiries, this is probably a pretty low priority.
Okay.
So I would say that as far as complaints go, we certainly field, a trickle of complaints of illegal overnight rentals. They generally don't seem to be attached to B&Bs in particular. So if you'll recall, a bed and breakfast does require the host to live on site. Most of our complaints are in regards to people that suspect illegal Airbnb type rentals. We have gotten some complaints from current B&B properties, but like I said, we haven't had, at least in my tenure, we have not had any new inquiries as to develop a new B&B or an Airbnb. It sounds like a lot of people are going through there are a lot that are for sale right now, the new condos and all that are coming online. So it seems like a lot of people are going through those channels at the moment. I don't necessarily think that the complaints have changed in volume as far as, B&Bs or overnight rentals or anything like that recently. So.
I just wanted to add, sorry, to clarify what Mila said. So there are new people that are desiring overnight accommodations, and those are in the condo developments that are part of the overnight accommodation residential overlay, but not just like an isolated house in a neighborhood. And so those were essentially condo, if you recall, like those were condo developments that were created with the intention that they could be residential uses now, but potentially become overnight accommodations in the future. And I just also wanted to say, as the last time when I was still on the planning commission, when I met with the county council, this issue did come up, and where the county council stood, and maybe Jalen can clarify if I'm getting this incorrect, but they seem to have some desire for the planning commission to address the issue of B&Bs being legal non-conforming uses. And so finding a way that essentially the owners of those legal non-conforming B&Bs could feel comfortable that their property was a legal use, and and which they, it is a legal non-conforming use, but the planning or the county council seemed to have some desire to address that issue of like, does legal non-conforming use, is that the right designation for these existing B&Bs moving forward, but didn't seem to have much appetite for revisiting the larger like B&B question. So.
Thanks, Abby. Kevin, I know you had your hand up.
Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to chime in that on Emily's remark earlier that I agree that when we look at redevelopment of overnight accommodations in general, that would be a good time to also look at that question for B&Bs, for people who want to add bedrooms or change something about their existing B&B operation.
So Brian, Rachel, Bob, do any of you have any comments related to this?
Good.
Not particularly.
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Rachel. I'll wait.
Oh yeah. No, not particularly. If they see, I thought it was a little bit more permissive, but it sounds like basically no one can currently apply for a new, B&B in a residential area, and so that's my main concern. So if they can't do that right now, then I don't really have any current concerns. I definitely would like to address, redevelopment of those, just so we're not dealing with that as they arise. We have some sort of standards in place before then.
Just to clarify, people can apply for a new B&B in a residential area. They would just have to go through the overnight accommodations overlay process and meet all of the standards.
That would be a legislative
Decision.
action. Okay, decision. Thank you. All right, Bob.
And I'm not terribly concerned at this point, given that the council would have to approve it, and there would be the same kind of things. Is it kind of a beneficial use to the community, and people would be heard, and it doesn't seem to be a pressing problem at this time. Of course, we want to keep our eye on it.
Ryan, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think the main concern with the neighborhood B&Bs are the traffic and the noise, and there's quite a few vested in the valley already. And in my personal opinion, I don't think they belong in a residential neighborhood, but they are, and we have to keep, like Bob said, we need to keep an eye on them and just kind of maintain what we have, I think.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for weighing in, and thank you staff for clarifying. So what I would recommend based off of the discussion is we probably should revisit timing around taking up redevelopment standards, maybe once we get notice back from council around the other topics that we've sent to them. And maybe at that time we should look up whether that is the right time to pull this in, which it sounds like it might be, and not address it as a separate item in the meantime. So I think it would be great, Gareth, to your question around data, just to kind of close the loop, if it would be possible, just to get some information about the type of code complaints that we're seeing from staff to the Planning Commission, just so that we have a sense of if it is a traffic issue or if there are other things that we might learn from if we do go back and revisit the code related to that use.
And I don't know if it's possible for staff to do this, but if they could talk to the sheriff's office and see, if they have, any kind of idea as to how many complaints they are getting that may not be going to the planning staff, just to get a better idea as to, is this an enormous problem? Is this a minor problem? Is this a couple of bad apples? Just to kind of close that loop.
Sure, we can pull together that kind of information. What time period would you be most interested in?
Whenever you feel like you've got time to pull it together. I mean, I know you guys are really busy and whatnot, so I don't think it's something that we need in the next month, but just put it on your to-do list to get to us at some point in time.
Oh, sure. I mean, as far as like, how far back are you interested in finding, complaints, like the past year or the past 6 months, or, are we thinking kind of since the OAO, or do you have any particular, period of complaints that you'd be wanting to see?
I think probably from, I was just going to say January 1st, 2019 through to wherever that data is pulled is probably a good window.
Okay, so about a year and a half.
Just to make it easy.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I mean, I think from a priority perspective, let's wait to see when we're going to get that on the agenda, if you all have time to pull it beforehand, but definitely not something that needs to happen immediately.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Gareth, for raising that and bringing us back to this issue. And as a follow-up, because it came up, I want to share that the letter that we sent was sent to the county council. I heard back from the assistant council administrator this afternoon, and she is going to try and get it on the June 2nd agenda. I did ask her to please put it higher in the packet. I don't know where it's going to end up in the agenda, but hopefully not in the waning minutes of the discussion. And I will attend and be there available for questions. But Kevin, I wanted to invite you as well, if you would like to attend instead, or if you'd like to attend with me to address questions, since this was something that you had drafted initially. You're obviously more than welcome to do that, and I'll defer to you if it's something that you would want to be point on.
I'm happy to show up there with you. So.
Okay, cool. So Kevin and I will attend then the June 2nd meeting, and we'll report back. And thank you everyone for your help in getting that drafted. I think that was a really great effort of just getting some clarification. Hopefully we will get a response that we can act on, just to start to maybe get a plan together for the second half of the year now that we're coming into June, as far as the things that we want to address. So redevelopment standards related to OAO, small area plan for 313, 191 intersection. And I'm sure there were some other things on the list of staffs that I cannot now remember that were more urgent priorities. So I'd love to just, I guess, put it back to staff. Is there anything else that is pressing that you see that we need to address in the back half of this year that we should be anticipating coming up on future agendas?
I think that you've covered most of it. I think, it would be good to address this redevelopment question. I think, we currently have no mechanism for expansion or redevelopment of any overnight rentals. And so that's a little bit of a tricky place to be as staff. If we do get those inquiries, we don't really have any way to field them. I think leaving B&Bs as a legal non-conforming use is fine for now, but it does seem like that's something that we also should probably clean up at some point and turn it into, whatever the decision ends up being. It would be great to have that be part of the code somewhere. And otherwise, I think that we've got all the right things on the list, the Highway 191 node planning and the small area plans that we've discussed a few times. As you know, the transportation planning effort is moving forward. So if Planning Commission wants to have an official response to that or input, I'm sure that would be welcome. We'll have to figure out what the new plan is for our update of the general plan once we figure out more about the budget. So that will be coming up as well, but we don't currently have a solid idea of how that's going to go.
Okay.
There was one thing I was thinking of, that we at least were going through the code, getting rid of conditional use, figuring whether it should be permitted or conditional use. I'm just thinking in Castle Valley, we had one of these conditional use things that we hadn't put as either permitted or non-permitted. And of course, the state makes these conditional uses such as, well, if they can meet this set of conditions, it's hard for you to say no. And I'm not sure we ever got through doing that. We got kind of partway through, and then the overnight rental thing hit. So maybe it should be on the list.
Mm-hmm. Kevin?
But was Mark also trying to make a comment?
Mark, I see you waving your hand. I'd like us to get through this part of the conversation as a planning commission, and then I'll invite you to speak as a citizen on the back side of the agenda. Thank you.
So I guess redevelopment has come up a couple of times, and I just wanted to throw an idea out there for planning staff and for the planning commission. One can imagine the situation where someone they're in the OAO zone, they submit their master plan, it gets approved, and then they later decide they want to change it. And so that would be a brand new legislative process. There wouldn't be any strict standards or anything, but they could move things around if the council agrees. And I think one very simple way of handling expansions is more or less the same way. We could just say all the existing OAs, they have a master plan, which is exactly what's on the ground right now. And if they want to change that master plan, they go through a process very similar to someone who would be, say, building a new hotel. And one advantage of this is it puts people building, right now, one can imagine a 40-room expansion of a hotel and a brand new 40-room hotel might be playing by very different rules. But I think under what I'm proposing, that will be the same sort of decision. And I think it would save us a lot of time in trying to come up with standards that address every possible contingency. So I just wanted people to think about that, radically simple way of handling expansions or redevelopment.
I remember the question that came up when that related to that during the broader discussions was that there are a lot of outdated OAO developments in the county. Many of them are in the city, but there are a few in the county. And would it be prohibitively expensive to meet the full development standards for them to make minor additions? I see you raising your hand. I don't want to get into a debate about it, but if I recall, it was that question of the trade-offs between, reaching some degree of more efficiency and better
I think
standards.
an orthogonal issue. I don't think the concern you raised would run afoul of the city.
Okay, and I could be remembering it wrong. Okay, so that's interesting. Bob, were you trying to say something?
No.
So hopefully we'll get information from council back as regarding that small area plan. I anticipate that it's something that they'll state as a priority, but we'll have some more clarification about sort of the scoping in their mind and what that might mean as far as the investment of time that we might need to put into that priority. I think that just revisiting kind of where we left things off with regards to redevelopment and updating the code might be a good place to start overall. So Mila and Abby, I know that staff is very busy right now, but would it be possible before our next meeting to just sort of summarize back to us where we left things in the code tables, things that seem outsized as priorities, where you might recommend we start, just by an accounting of the type of requests and applications that you have seen that have come up against things like the conditional uses within our use tables where they still exist. And I don't know, I mean, Kevin raises a good point with regards to redevelopment. Maybe it doesn't have to be a gigantic undertaking, but I don't know the implications from that from a planning perspective, possibly a legal perspective. So it might be, if you would be open to just sort of giving a stab at putting some thought around that as a possibility and just summarize what staff's, I don't want to say take a position on it, but like some of the trade-offs that staff might point to with that option, and some of the other ways that you, based off of how other cities and counties have addressed this, just any thoughts that you might have. That way, coming out of our next meeting, hopefully we can come up with a plan for, what we're actually trying to prioritize and maybe just hit the ball running, because it seems like it's something that's going to be sitting over our heads until we pick it up. I know we lost our opportunity for our workshop because of the changes in our everything. So I don't know if we'll be able to do a full workshop, but if we could spend, the first part of the meeting going through that, I think that would be a good use of time.
Sure. Yeah, we can definitely do that. And I think that we should have enough time to at least pull something together, a summary at least for next meeting for sure.
Okay. If you get into that and you're just like, this is actually going to be way too much for one meeting, we can just converse over email and figure out how we want to split that up.
Okay.
Garish?
I was just going to say, redevelopment has come up several times, but I wonder what the demand is. So Mila, maybe you could talk to Zachariah and anybody else who might have an idea of, is there a lot of interest and a lot of inquiry coming into your office from people who say, we have this use, we want to redevelop? I just wonder if how pressing it is as a priority. And I think that if we knew that there was a lot of interest or very little interest or whatever, it would help set the priority too.
Sure. Yeah, we can address that. I think it's a little bit tricky, I think, to base priorities on the questions that we get in our office, because we do have a lot of information out there for people prior to them coming and asking us questions, and the information about the OAO seems to have percolated well. So I would suspect that it's possible we're not getting questions about redevelopment because people know that it's not allowed, essentially, or they know that they have to go through the process. I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't know. It's hard to say what we're not getting. But I think that just considering from sort of like the basic standpoint of knowing that it's a gap in our code and that we currently don't have a mechanism for that to address that, I think that would be a better way to evaluate whether or not it's a priority, rather than the questions that we're getting.
Well, I think that's great if we could just sort of see where we left off, look at some of the options that are on the table at our next meeting. That would be extremely helpful. If you have that anecdotal data, that would be great to provide in the packet. And just thank you to staff for picking this up when you already have your hands full. So I know that we have a citizen who wanted to make comment before we move there. Any other discussion items, just so we can wrap up this agenda item for the commission? Okay. So since we had discussed doing citizens to be heard at 5 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock and didn't land on that, Mark, if you'd like to make a citizen comment, I'll welcome you to come off mute. Could you state your full name for the recording?
Mark Aaron Horowitz. I live in Boulder Avenue. Thank you for letting me comment on the agenda item, which is discussion about B&Bs in residential zones, of which I have been one for 20 years or more, 21 years, mine give or take 3 or 4. The last 4 years in a row, well, we were just entering our 4th year when our business vaporized. Health is wealth, I always say. If I might interject, I hope you're all healthy and happy, and pray for all beings. I ran a bed and breakfast for 14 years or so, and I stopped because running 5 rooms was terrible, terrible. And I'm my biggest critic, far more than my neighbors. For the last 4 years, we were just entering our 4th year, we've rented 1 room. So when we signed up for a B&B license, we signed up for 1 room. But I must have blinked because I don't remember it happening, but we became a legal non-compliant use. And that prevents me from any kind of expansion. It kind of pulled the rug out from under me. I was just developing some plans. We have 3 rooms downstairs, which we rent to locals. We have no intention of boating our locals out. I want to add 2 rooms to my 600 square foot covered deck. And I'm not able to do that. I'll just tell you my experience. I know Garish mentioned Airbnb a lot, as though Airbnb is almost like B&B and Airbnb are synonymous. I am not, although I have a B&B license, I'm not a B&B owner. I only rent through Airbnb. And I will tell you my experience of 200 days for 3 years in a row in my 1 room, I have had not one single problem. And I'm telling you, I look for problems. I make sure they know that they are to be quiet, that they're to respect my neighbors, that they're to respect my downstairs people, and they're to respect me, or else. And they do, always, because otherwise they get a lousy referral. So, I know much of the discussion was with regards to opening up the possibility of other bed and breakfasts in neighborhoods. And I personally would rather see 100 houses in this town generating 1 room rental than seeing a new 100-room hotel. Can you imagine my frustration to see the council approve 60 new campsites here and the Cane Springs thing and all these where I'm still in non-compliant use, and I don't get it. It doesn't seem fair. I know life isn't fair, but I've heard a lot of good things today, much from Garish and also from Kevin. Thank you for your consideration on this matter. I just encourage you to re-legitimize responsible bed and breakfasts. No one in my neighborhood is freaked out by my place. And if I had 2 more rooms, the same thing would be the case, because I'm the policeman in my house, you dig? I'll tell you, the house next door to me is a duplex that rents to 16 people or more every single night, 220 nights a year. And, you know, I got to say they're an exemplary case in this circumstance, because they tell their people that if they're making noise outside their house at 9 o'clock or later, that they're going to have to deal with me, the neighbor, and so they know to keep quiet.
Thank you, Mark.
Am I done or what?
Well, I did 3 minutes. So if you want to
Oh.
just wrap it up and.
Okay, well, I'll wrap it up by saying it might not seem consequential to you, but to me, it's 90% consequential. I've been running it and doing a good job for years and years and years, and I don't think it was fair to pull the rug out from those of us who are already operating responsible bed and breakfast. So anyway, thanks for, I'll kind of keep my finger on the pulse. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments.
And Emily,
Yes.
this is Jaylyn. I would like to speak as a citizen, completely take my council hat off. As a citizen and an owner of a B&B, this is our 4th year, and of course everything fell to pieces in March, and that's fine. My understanding is that, and feel free to time me for my 3 minutes. My understanding is that there was never an intent to expand the number of already existing legally operating B&Bs. In contrast to most motels and condos, which are owned by, usually by outside developers, most B&Bs are owned by locals who are supplementing their income that's not quite adequate for our high cost of living and low wage area. So the intent in my mind is to give these owners, myself included, mostly local people, a better standing and status that's a bit more solid than legal non-conforming use. And the simple solution in my mind to that is to treat them as all other OA types were treated, and that's create an overlay for B&Bs and then apply that overlay just to that specific legally existing legal non-conforming use B&B, so that they have a more certain status. And you know, I won't go into reasons why I think that's a good idea. And then the second issue that many of you have mentioned is also the right to redevelop. I don't think you can redevelop a non-conforming use. I can't wrap my mind around that, but maybe you can. And then just, I would invite any of you to come to my place. We've never in 4 years of operation had anyone park on the street. We have ample parking for vehicles and trailers, and no one has ever been on the street or in a driveway. And we provide a service for a different type of visitor. We have many grandmas and grandpas come and bring their grandchildren to explore the area, and they want a place to sit down and chill at the end of the day where they're all in one room relaxing together. My B&B might be a bit different because I don't rent single rooms out. I have 3 rooms, a bathroom, a living area, and kitchen that I rent as a unit. So I'm not dealing with a whole bunch of different people at once. It's a family or a group of retired people coming for the car show. I just think it's a good service to offer visitors, and many visitors prefer that. And I've never had any complaints from my neighbors. And again, I invite you all to come to my place before you make a blanket judgment on all B&Bs, because they're not. I would be heartbroken if I lived next to the B&B that's being described in the area where we had so many problems before. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you for your comments, and put your hat back on.
I would like to just make one comment that for Jalen and for Mark and other responsible B&B owners who advertise and book through Airbnb, I'm sorry if I kind of inadvertently slammed you in some way. What I was talking about, and Airbnb may be the wrong thing, but a bed and breakfast that doesn't serve breakfast and a bed and breakfast that doesn't have the owner living on site, to me is more like a hotel, a little mini hotel. So I was trying to differentiate between true bed and breakfast where, you know, you go rent a room, you have breakfast served by the host versus a place that has multiple rooms and, you know, advertises 16 or more people and potentially creates problems for the neighborhood. So Jalen, sorry, and Mark, sorry if I lumped you in with a different characterization that I was trying to make.
No apology necessary, Garish. Thank you.
All right. So let's go ahead and move on, and we'll make sure that we revisit this in a future agenda and provide additional context in the packet. What I just want to make sure that we are inviting the public to comment uniformly if it's something we're going to go further down. So great. So it sounds like there's no future considerations beyond those that have been raised already. So Jalen, if you want to put your council hat back on, and I would love to hear the update from County Council.
Okay, thank you. Council hat is back on. So we're getting a fair number of letters in support of the Willis Springs Campground proposal north of town, and that public hearing will close. I believe it closes tomorrow for the written portion, and we'll feasibly be voting on it next Tuesday. I just thought you might be interested to hear that. There's been some sort of letter writing campaign organized. We're having 2 special meetings this week. There's a meeting on Thursday at 9 a.m. We'll be getting an update from the hospital and health departments, and we're also meeting to consider approving a new joint order that will take effect on May 29th. I have not seen a sneak peek copy of this order yet. My understanding is that it's somewhere between where the state intends to move in their risk category and where Grand County has been. So it will be a little bit more permissive, but not as permissive as the state at this point. We have 7. Just checking the website today and reading email, 7 cases of COVID-19 in Grand County. 3 of them are active. And the latest email I got said that the latest case appeared to be after doing contact tracing on this last case. It appears that it was transmitted through contact with an earlier Grand County case. And then on Friday at 10 a.m. there's a joint meeting with the Moab City Council, Castle Valley Town Council, as well, to consider approving a letter of support for the local national parks to begin a phased reopening with a temporary timed entry system. And again, I have not seen those documents yet either. My understanding is they are not made public until the Department of the Interior, DOI, approves them. So I believe that outlines will be shared at this meeting, but not the exact document before the letter is approved or not approved. In addition to that, you may also be interested to know that tomorrow, Wednesday, there is a meeting at 2 o'clock of the Arches Hotspot Funding task force group committee, whatever that is, that will be meeting tomorrow to discuss possible uses and plans to mitigate traffic and congestion in our area with the money that provided we can come up with a good enough plan that UDOT has or will allocate to Grand County and Moab City. And that's all I have, unless you have questions.
I noticed in the TI an article talking about some council priorities, and one noted diversification within the economy, remote workers. Having been a remote worker here for going on 10 years, it's definitely something that I am very passionate about. I've worked with some Salt Lake-based tech companies, and been lucky to be down here. Just curious if that's something that's, preliminary. Mila, maybe this is something you might be able to speak on as well, because I know it's also including the economic development group. But I'd love just to know sort of where that conversation sits, what spurs it, who in the Wasatch Front area might be involved in those conversations, and how people can get involved. Because personally, I would really love to get involved, and I'm going to reach out to Councilman Wells on this, but I'm sure that I'm not alone.
Right. And again, you're talking to the wrong council person. Councilman Wells would be the person to talk to about that. And I have to confess, I had to leave for a few minutes during his presentation. So I'm not entirely up to speed on where he would like to go with that. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I would be, I can just speak to the bit that the Community Economic Development Department has been working on, which is to try and establish a co-working space in Moab. We have applied, with some local businesses, applied for a grant to get one going last year. Unfortunately, we did not receive that, or they didn't receive that, but I believe they're going to apply again. We have also met with a co-working based business to talk about potential areas and spaces that would work. I know that it is a need in the community, and we are definitely trying to figure out a way to meet that. But right now, CED is mostly working on a co-working space as the route to get there.
Well, I'll follow up for more information offline there, because I think that that's really fascinating. But I'll just say for the record, I'm really glad to see the county investing in this. Our location relative to Salt Lake City and Denver and even Phoenix, especially now that many large technology companies that have been historically based in places like San Francisco area are moving remote, this opens up a huge possibility to attract workers that are educated in kind of the new economy, people who not just might be able to share their income and tax base, but also who can provide assistance and mentorship to people here who also are interested in getting involved in some of those industries and jobs. So I'm really glad to see the county investing in this, and I think that bodes very well for potential opportunities for diversification. So Girish, sorry I talked over your hand multiple times.
That's okay, Emily. I'm getting used to it. Jalen, I realize that you may be voting on Willow Springs Campground, or at least it'll be coming up for a vote at your next meeting. It is hand in hand tied to the letter that the Planning Commission sent to the County Council. And if the council feels like they would like to have a little more time to think about the area plan for 313, I suggest that maybe the vote for any of those developments that are in the pipeline now be postponed until such time as we do come up with that area plan.
I would second that.
Thank you.
Brian, are you trying to speak? Okay. Okay, well, are there any other issues that need to be addressed or brought up by the Planning Commission?
I did have one. I know we have a planning commission vacancy right now. And what's the time frame for the application process? I mean, do we still encourage people to put their application in, or I really don't know.
Yeah, right now it's listed as, I believe, open until filled. And we've had one applicant. So if you would like to get the word out, please do so.
Why don't we touch base just about, what sort of time parameters we want to put on that. If there is somebody who's interested, I don't want to hold it open just because, but I also think it would be, it's a crazy time and I want to give people the opportunity to become aware of this. So maybe everybody on the commission to take on the responsibility of telling at least 3 people and ask them to tell 3 people. And we'll see if we get some interest in the next 2 weeks, and then maybe we can schedule that interview or interviews. All right. Well, anyone want to adjourn? Make a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Great.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. See you in a few weeks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.